Committee of the Whole to order. Council President McGurven is still waiting to testify Senate Transportation. So I'm gonna carry on for him until he gets here, and then he will take over. Because of that, we're gonna move things around a little bit, and we are going to start with the presentation on EHHS. Preeti?
I'm here, just getting my video. How do I do that? All right. Good evening. I'm Preeti Sridhar with the Equity, Housing and Human Services Department. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present a short presentation of our newly formed department, and also an opportunity to share with you a proposal for the use of ARPA funds. I have with me members of my staff and also Linda Muschetti from our department, who will help with the PowerPoint that you have with you and also will be sharing. Next slide, please. So what we'll be talking about today is a little bit about the newly formed department, who we are, our priorities, who we are here to serve, and as I mentioned, share with you the focus of the funds that we're allocating in terms of the ARPA funds. And if we do have the time, I'd like to share some of the accomplishments that our new department has achieved in just the few months that we've been formed. Next slide, please. So the Equity, Housing and Human Services Department was formed in September of last year as part of the organization. And the creation of this department was really to give a specific focus on the high priority needs of the community, to emphasize equity, and also to focus on affordable housing, to move, to bring all these areas under one umbrella, to move housing, specifically affordable housing, from CED, to move human services from the former community services department, and equity that you know, kind of inclusion and equity that evolved from in the executive department and the mayor's office, has really been a focal point of our business plan. And creating this department was our way to emphasize that these are priorities for our city, our community, and bringing them under this one umbrella was a way for us to really give our emphasis to these issues that are critical, not just for our city as the city of Renton, but our, citywide issues that impact our residents and businesses. Next slide, please. So this is our team, small, but very, very determined and committed. Benita Horn, our inclusion and equity consultant. Mark Santos Johnson and Hannah Bonmiller, dedicated to housing. Guy Williams, Mark Baldridge, Diane Utecht, Kerry Gracious, all in the human services area. Linda Muschetti and myself in the overall administration. Next slide. And we still have a couple of positions that we hope to fill soon. The administrative secretary to support both housing and human services, a community outreach coordinator position, and a DEI coordinator position that is currently not yet funded. Next slide, please. So what are our key priorities? I think that's really critical. In fact, in terms of equity, what I really say often is equity doesn't really belong in EHHS. It belongs everywhere. It has to be embedded in everything we do. I've often used the term, it has to be part of the DNA of what we do. And one of our key priorities, as I mentioned earlier, is to support that very critical statement of our business plan to build an inclusive, informed, and hate-free city with equitable outcomes for all in support of social, economic, and racial justice. I apologize, we had an updated version of this PowerPoint, which for some reason is not showing up on the screen, but I have the right words, so I shall use those. And also for us to enhance, and strengthen our community access and partners. In terms of housing, we have to strive for an equitable city, which has to be built on the foundation of affordability. And similarly, in terms of our housing goals, all our Renton residents should have access to safe, decent, and affordable housing. For human services, to promote safe, healthy, secure, and security so that we can be inclusive and foster equity and social and emotional support for those, especially those who are vulnerable and marginalized in our city. And this leads us to who do we serve? And while there are specific targets and specific audiences for each of our areas, for instance, in terms of, next slide, please, Linda. In terms of equity, we serve our Renton residents, our community partners. We're also serving the mayor, council, staff at all levels, boards and commissions. We're also making sure that everyone in the city, internal and external, is an audience when it comes to equity. For housing, all our residents, tenants, landlords, homeowners, we have a special emphasis on low and moderate income households. And there's a range of households and housing units in Renton, and both owner-occupied and rental units that we're looking at when it comes to our housing. And we work with a range of various organizations, nonprofit organizations, and human service organizations. And for human service, again, a huge part of our work is working with human service providers. And we have to make sure that we work with everyone in our community to make sure that they have access to human services. Now, this is really important because this leads us to that next focus of our ARPA funds. Next slide, please. So when we look at what are our priorities and who do we serve, initially, prior to when EHHS department was formed, the city had budgeted $1.5 million for ARPA, and we had the city had determined that the ARPA funds would be for the debt forgiveness for those who had outstanding utility bills owed to the city, as well as for rent assistance to some of our disadvantaged residents, and any other uses that we could determine using the equity lens. But once EHHS was formed, we looking at these priorities, and we did some extensive research. We looked at other cities, how they'd used the ARPA funds. And we felt that while these priorities are also critical, and I'll get back to these in just a couple of slides, we felt that we could come back with a recommendation of ARPA funds that could meet some more critical needs and be put to use in a way that could directly impact those in our community, and have some immediate impact. Next slide, please. And that's why we're coming back to you today with some of these recommendations. So one of the first things we found was that the last time the city did any kind of a human service needs assessment was in 2014. And so you can see that from 2014 to now, there's been significant changes in who we are as a city, where our populations have changed, what the human service needs are. So immediately we put that as a priority, and as we speak, we are evaluating RFPs, and we will soon start a human service and equity needs assessment. And obviously, it's not enough just to do a human service needs assessment, have a plan, and have that plan sitting on a desk. If you do an assessment, you want to implement what that assessment says are critical needs. So one of our first asks of you is we have a wonderful opportunity to use some of these funds to implement what those priority needs are. And so that's one of the things we're asking in this proposal, saying, let's put some money aside, because when we get the priorities from this needs assessment, let's implement right away so we can have a response to our community saying, you are telling us these are critical needs, we'll make that happen. The other ask is, we know that we have a certain amount of funding every year that goes to our human services agencies. We also know that that funding hasn't changed for years, and it's not a lot. By increasing that funding by 20%, it'll make a significant difference. And that can be used right away. It can go into the hands of those people who are really making a difference. So that's a second ask. And we also know, number three, that there are some of those agencies who are directly working with those impacted by COVID. So that's a third ask. And then through my work previously with working on the census, we realized that there are several agencies out here who don't make it to our system. These are the small agencies who reach out to many of our minority populations, non-English speaking populations. And we had a lot of success working with them during the census. In fact, using strategies like feeding programs, and then through their help, getting people to sign up for the census. So we're recommending, let's work through, and we've already talked to the Renton Regional Community Foundation, let's work with them to reach out to these agencies who otherwise never get a chance, so that through them we can reach some of these populations who are always left behind. Another new and innovative approach is to work with Pastor Casey Hahn, St. Matthew's Church, and the Village of Hope to look at human services with a whole different approach, not just to provide additional funding and an additional set of resources for homeless women, children, and families, but look at this strategically to provide one-stop shop of services, but ultimately get them out of the cycle of homelessness. We're evaluating and working on a strategy with them. We're calling it the Village of Hope, something like what we did with the Center of Hope, when it was located at City Hall, and a program that the city of Redmond has. We want to continue some support for REACH as they establish themselves in Lake Ridge. And we also want to add, just for this year, going forward, we want to do this through our biennial budget, expanded time for the administrative secretary from a half-time to a full-time, so that we can use more of the human service work for the CDBG, some of the human service needs assessment, rental registration program, because our work has, as you can see, just in the few minutes I'm talking, expanded significantly, and we want to keep expanding work both in human services and equity. And finally, we want to be, we've kind of pulled here, pushed here, and done all this remarkable work in equity. We want to increase some of our hours with our consultant so that we can continue to lay the foundation and continue to expand the work, continue to establish the Equity Commission, which we've been doing some really great work with, and until, again, in the next biennial budget, we establish a position for the DEI coordinator. Next slide, please. So this articulates what I just shared with you in specifics. It adds up to the 1.5 million that we talked about. And if I have, I think, a committee report that states this, I can pause here if you have any questions. I don't know how much I've gone in terms of time, but what I had promised to do was to stop here. If I have more time, I can share just a little bit with you in terms of some of the other things we've accomplished and some highlights. But I can pause here if you have questions. What's your wish, Council?
Thank you, Preeti. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. I was going to have you go back to this slide if we made it all the way through the presentation, because I figured this is where the conversation might be. So if we're at a good break right now, I would entertain any questions at this time. I'm not seeing any, but maybe we'll come back to that. No hands raised. Why don't we proceed? And if there is some more questions, we'll circle back to probably this slide at the end.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So this is, I'll just rush through this one. I just wanted to reiterate, we want to come back on rental assistance because the governor's moratorium does expire on the 31st. And so we're very mindful that that's a need in our community. And we are looking at that program, but we want to do it right. And we are both looking at how we can establish that program, similarly with human utility assistance and with other human service needs. There's a sizable amount of the ARPA funds that the city has not yet allocated. So I just want to share and put that forward with council, that we are very mindful of that, and we hope to come back to you soon with that. And again, if there are any suggestions or any specific direction the council has, I would love to hear that as we go forward and shape our recommendations to you. Next slide, please. So here I'll touch on some of the key highlights. I won't spend time with every word, but I do encourage you, when you have the time, to look at some of this. Like I said, we're a feisty team and very proud of the steps we're taking. Next slide, please. So here are some of the housing projects we have. And some of you have already attended some of these in the Sunset area. Willow Crest is one we're especially proud of because it's an ownership project. We're also looking at how we can get Willow Crest phase 2 kicked off. Sunset Gardens, of course, is a big one. Next slide, please. We've also just adopted the first housing action plan for the city. That's a big deal. Talking about Sunset Gardens, thanks to your support and the HB 1590 funds, we were able to award 1.5 million to RHA for the Sunset Gardens. I mentioned earlier the RFP for the Community and Equity Human Service Assessment. We're very excited about it. We've received several RFPs from the consultant sector, and we hope to be able to determine and get a good firm working on this for us and moving on this later I think in a month and a half. We received a $100,000 grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce for our housing action plan. Next slide, please. This is one I will not read out, but again, lots of text, which means a lot of accomplishments. Next slide, please. As you know, we had a perfect storm, no pun intended, this past holiday season. And one of the things that we were able to do was, despite all the odds against us, we were able to provide shelter for 29 people who would have otherwise experienced severe cold during the holidays. And I'm so glad we could do that. And some of the behind the scenes story, 300 Rainier Avenue building was not functional. HVAC systems were not working there. We were able to mobilize the Highlands Neighborhood Center for that. We operated a 24/7 shelter, which typically we don't do for cold weather. And all this happened with people being on vacation, multiple challenges. So I'm really pleased with everyone in the team and other departments coming together last minute to make it happen. Renton was really unique in doing this, so I just wanted to share that. Also want to share, we have a fantastic human services guide, resource guide available in multiple languages. Another kudos, several cities around look at this as a resource for them. Next slide, please. This is just to give you a sense of where our funding goes. Next slide, please. Again, this is some of the programs and services we're doing for human services. I do want to let you know that as we are forming our department and going forward, we're rethinking a lot of things. We're looking at really starting with what does our community need, and then how should we be established to meet those needs, rather than this is the way we've done business forever. I really think, business as usual is not our slogan anymore. Next slide, please. And for equity, we've been coming to you for a long time and sharing with you. We'll be doing this with some of the new council members again. But our big hurrah is we're working on the Equity Commission, and we've received over 30 applications, which is, I think, the first for the city for any board or commission. So we're very excited about that. And we are looking forward to bringing you the recommendations for the commissioners once we go through the interview panels. The panels are going through the interviews as we speak this week. And another thing we did in the end of November with the finance department was a very successful workshop on inclusive contracting with the city. So these are some of the things I wanted to share. It feels like forever, but it's only a couple months of EHHS. So I guess that's a good sign. Again, look forward to your questions, and I hope that you will authorize our committee report, because that means more for me to do.
Thank you very much, Preeti, for the presentation. Great overview. and definitely look forward to the conversation from council members and any questions you might have at this time. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so either Preeti, you nailed it 100% all the way through, or people are still marinating on everything you shared about all the facts in there. I want to kick us off maybe with a question. Oh, Councilmember Perez, please go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Bree. Great job. Thank you very much for all the information that you provide. I had a question regarding the applications for the Equity Commission. Very, very excited that we have so many applications, so much that we have broken records of applicants. I hope that more people will be excited to apply to other commissions and boards as well in the future. I couldn't understand exactly what do you say is going to be the process. Do you guys chose a panel of I don't know, citizens, residents that will help you to have the final word of who's going to be part of this commission? I'm just not too much detail, but just to give me an overview of how we're going to proceed with so many applications, because I don't want anybody to be disappointed, that if they don't make it, we know that we have other boards and commissions that also they can apply.
Yes, great question. So so there was a long list of names that was suggested. The names included some members of the task force, some businesses, some residents, some other of our partners and stakeholders, like people from the school district and Valley Medical, and so just a range of community members, etc. And so they were all sent invitations to see if they could be on the panel, and dates, because we wanted to do this, as as quickly as possible. And so whoever responded, the panel was then broken up into, whoever responded was broken up into, the mayor looked at the names and approved, and they were divided into 3 groups so that it was manageable, because you're talking 30 everyone who applied, unless they were ineligible, as in if they were not I think there was maybe 1 or 2 people who were not eligible because of not meeting the basic criteria. And the form was very simple. It's the same thing that was there for every board and commission. So then the panel was divided up so that the different people could interview. And initially the interviews were going to be in December, but it didn't work with schedule, so they're happening now. And then I'm not part of it, so I'm just relating to you what's going on. And then once the panelists select from the different, and then there's a set of questions. Basically, again, it's a more welcoming, and the question you asked about if you can't serve on this board, are you interested in another one, is a critical question, because we want to take advantage of this great wealth of applicants. Then these panelists will all come together with their recommendations, make the recommendation to the mayor, and then I think the mayor will come to you for final approval.
Thank you, Preeti.
Great question. I was certainly wondering the same thing. The question I might ask, if I can follow up, and since I don't see any other hands raised at the moment, would be along those lines, the Human Services Advisory Committee, how have they been involved through this process, both specifically on the update of the community needs assessment and any consultation they've been involved in as far as advising out how we would spend out the portion of the dollars we would be allocating here potentially?
So I have been attending the Human Service Needs Assessment, Human Service Advisory Committee, and I have been, they're very interested in the Equity Commission as well. So part of, so I was hoping once we hear back from you that I'll go back to them with the detail. And what I think will be very interesting is, again, as we go forward, to work with the Human Service Advisory Committee to kind of redefine, as we redefine, as human services gets redefined with EHHS, both their role, their interest, and because all these, even, with this definition of ARPA and all these new programs, everything is kind of being reestablished. And I see their role, kind of helping shape our role, and our role kind of helping shape their role. It's kind of a morphing together. So in the two meetings I attended, there was a lot of excitement that they expressed. Plus, there are a few new members that have joined. And plus, the other question that has come up, which is still to be answered, is the working of the Human Services Committee with the Equity Commission. So I think there are all these open opportunities, and I don't think it's for me here to define it, but to kind of open these doors so that, it evolves together in a way that, really creates these opportunities.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer. Didn't hear the Human Services Advisory Committee mentioned, so I thought I would inject them in just to know what role they might have potentially. If I can, I'm still not seeing a hand, so I'm going to keep asking questions. The slide you had mentioned, you had paused on before. I do want to make sure I did understand one item nice, since we do have a committee report for approval on this tonight, and the portion that would go for the equity and community needs assessment and human services plan implementation, $775,000. Do I understand that correctly? That includes the 20% of that, the $300,000 that would also go towards human services to implement it? Is $300,000 of that would be allocated directly to agencies? Is that the intent?
Yes, the 20% would be agencies, and the human service needs assessment is only for the implementation. The needs assessment itself, we're not using the ARPA dollars.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So roughly half of what we're looking at is going directly towards that, is what I'm seeing line item out here.
Yes.
Okay. I saw a hand raised, and there you go, Councilman Obama.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. You took one of my questions, but thank you for your answer, Preeti. In terms of the Equity Commission, what is the timeline? You were saying they're in interview right now, but as far as bringing it back up to council for approval of the appointment. And then, of course, the other part of it is, when you're speaking to the panelists, you mentioned before, but who are on the panelists as far as the interviewers? And what are the criteria for those individuals?
I don't have the list in front of me. I can get it and send it over to you. And in terms of the timeline, I believe we might be coming to council either the first or second meeting in Feb with the recommendation. But yeah, we had almost 14 different members in the panel. Not all of them accepted, so it whittled down to a fewer members.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Perez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Preeti, you were talking about the needs assessment. Just to clarify, the idea is still after the needs assessment, and is that our human services board, advisory board, are the ones that are going to keep recommending to us where the organizations that we are going to be supporting, or this role is going to change?
No, the human service needs assessment is, we're going to get a consultant who's actually going to do a full-fledged assessment with the community, with not just the agencies, but everyone who's out there, they're going to do a combination of surveys, combination of looking at the community who's out there, internal, external, and come back with a comprehensive report to say, here's what is needed in this city. And so and then we will look at that, and if, for instance, I don't want to guess here what they'll say, but assuming they say the biggest need out here is you need to have sheltering services for your community because there's a big lack for that, or feeding programs are not sufficient. I'm making this up, right? And these are the costs that go with providing those services. Then we look at that and say, these are the services we have, but here's a gap. And we've got these funds that are allocated. Let's at least start with meeting these needs.
Thank you. Yeah, that I love it. But my question is about the Human Service Advisory Board. In the past, and correct me, President McKerven, because you were part of that board for so many years, and maybe I'm gonna not say it correctly. Part of the vital role of the advisory board is to make a recommendation to the council of the organizations, nonprofit organizations, where we will normally regularly during our budget year, we will allocate resources for them. Will they continue to do this role, and they will use the needs assessment results to make different kind of recommendations, or to, I don't know, I'm kind of trying to figure out here how we're going to work together with them on this, if these tools are going to be available for them to make the recommendations.
Yes, I think these tools will help. So right now, the Human Service Committee interviews the agencies that put forward their proposals, and then they allocate the funds. And the process has been just restricted to that. With this broader needs assessment, we're going even beyond. The last time the needs assessment was done was in 2014. So I think this is one big step we're doing to see, well, what are really the needs out there? And so firstly, we'll come back with, here are the needs out there. Let's start addressing and addressing those needs. And then starting with this information, it will also help us determine, as we start funding these agencies, and I think it'll be a place for us to pause and ask that question. Do we continue funding these agencies at the level we have? Do we need to expand? Do we need to change? I don't know. I'm new to this role. So it will give me as an opportunity as well to sit down with the Human Services Committee and say, now we have this information as well. How should we proceed? Do the two processes work together? Is there an opportunity to expand, to revisit? Irrespective, I think it'll be a great source of information we'll have to help us shape this as we go forward.
Thank you, Preeti.
Preeti, may I just add a word or two?
Yes, please.
Thank you. The process and role of the Human Services Advisory Committee will not change. Both of the consulting teams that are finalists propose that there be some kind of a sounding board or steering committee that they would work with, and would include members of the Human Services Advisory Committee to even guide the assessment process. So the difference will be, as Preeti so aptly stated, is that instead of just responding to requests that are made for funding, we as the city will actually have in our hands a roadmap that will allow us to see what are the actual needs in our community, what are being met, what are not being met, and how do we support those agencies that are meeting needs, and how do we close the gaps for needs that are not being met. And of course, all of the funding will, as always, be guided by the Human Services Advisory Committee. But they will have a tangible game plan that will allow them to make discernments about funding that they've not had as a resource until now. Thank you.
Thank you, Benita. And I want to correct myself. I was calling it the Human Services Advisory Board, and it's an advisory committee. Thank you for correcting me.
Thank you, Councilmember Perez. I was going to chime in, but I think Benita and Preeti said exactly what I would have said. So I want to close us out on this agenda item if I can, so we can move on and leave time for the remaining two. The last item of business, I just want to confirm that as presented, that allocation of ARPA funds, that if there's any issues with moving that forward, that now is the time to so state. Otherwise, I will intend on advancing that during the council meeting tonight, virtually signing the committee report. All right, I'm not seeing any objections, so we'll go ahead and move that forward. Thank you very much, Preeti and Benita. And also thank you to Councilmember Prince for getting us started. I was wrapping up testimony in the Senate Transportation Committee, and so almost made it, so close. With that, I'm happy to continue going out of order. If the CED folks are teed up and ready to go, and then we can close out, we'll make sure we leave some time for regional boards to discuss. But I see Vanessa Dolby has come on screen, and and Chip, there we go. Happy to turn it over to folks from CED to talk about health through housing. Take it away, thank you.
All right, good evening, Council President and members of the Council. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Vanessa Dolby. I'm the Planning Director for CED. And I'm going to kick off this item this evening by a little bit of background and then hand it off to Clark Close, our Senior Planner, to do the primary portion of the presentation and share his PowerPoint. But as you all may be aware, the King County Health Through Housing project to be presented this evening is a culmination of a combination of efforts and negotiations between the city and King County that began with the deintensification shelter that was moved to Renton to the Red Lion site at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a part of these negotiations with the city and King County, various permitting options were presented for a permanent site for housing of the county's most vulnerable population. So these options included a traditional land use permitting process that would follow our normal processes in front of the public, a public hearing in front of our hearing examiner. And then the hearing examiner would issue a decision on a normal land use decision, and that's kind of our typical process. But alternatively, we offered a process that we're here tonight for, to advance a development agreement and to utilize our legislative process to come before you to have this conversation and then hold a public hearing this evening for testimony. And so King County has opted to follow the legislative process, which is what brings us here this evening. And then given this unique situation, Clark is here to present the development project, its associated development agreement to you this evening, and then the public hearing will follow on the same topic. And then his presentation is going to be more typical of what we would present to a hearing examiner as a part of a land use entitlement, and it will go through all those details. So, and then the outcome of this would be the formal land use application that will actually authorize the use at this site as we would normally do through a hearing examiner process. So without further delay, I will hand it over to Clark Close, the Senior Planner, to share his screen.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. Go ahead and share. It may take a second here to pull up. Here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes, but we can see your notes at the moment as well.
Oh, you can see the notes. Okay, so let me switch to that one. Can you see the notes on that slide?
You're good to go.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Council President McIrvin, members of council. For those of you who don't know me, Clark Lowe, Senior Planner with CED in the current Planning Division. And as Vanessa mentioned, that this is a land use application in the form of a development agreement. It also includes 9 exhibits, and that was, accepted through the traditional land use application process. And then, as Vanessa mentioned, that this is between the city of Renton and King County for a permanent supportive housing site at or on Oakdale Avenue. So, we've got 10 slides here to run through, and the presentation overview kind of includes project request and location, background summary, a little bit more about the development agreement, some written municipal codes that were analyzed, and then staff's recommendation. King County Department of Community Health and Services is requesting this development agreement and a change of use to convert the Extended Stay America Hotel to permanent supportive housing. This was accepted on October 8th and determined complete on November 8th. The project site address is 1150 Oakdale Avenue Southwest. The site is located in the commercial office zone, and as part of this process, the county acted as their own SEPA lead agency. So they completed that process as part of their project, and they issued a determination of non-significance pursuant to WAC 197.11.342, and that was completed on October 12th of last year. As part of that process, no appeals were filed. So the site, zooming in there, is a 3.9 acre site. It's located in the Valley Community Planning Area. The site has direct access to Oakdale Avenue Southwest. The site itself was originally developed as a 110-room extended stay hotel. The building was built in 1998 as a 3-story building. The approximate size of the existing building is 68,000 square feet. Each room offers a bed or beds, a kitchenette, a bathroom, and each room is approximately 318 to 470 square feet in size. And so, as I mentioned, the county is proposing to convert the extended stay hotel to approximately 106 affordable units. So it would be include, kind of converting some of the existing rooms to get down to 106. And then they would also propose to retain 117 of the surface parking spaces in the process. The project would include some minor site plan and building improvements, such as an enclosed outdoor amenity area for residents, some new fencing, a larger refuse and recycling area, and equipping each studio room with a refrigerator, oven, range, and microwave, so essentially a kitchen. So a little bit about the background. So the county purchased the property in last year, and then the Washington State Legislature has authorized the execution of development agreements between local governments and an entity having ownership and control of real property within its jurisdiction. So that can be found under RCW 3670B, and those sections are 170 through 210. And in this particular case, as I mentioned, it's between the city and King County DCHS. So the proposed use would include 24-hour staffing. They would have a code of conduct for all residents. They would have active individualized case management, wraparound service availability for residents, and they would adhere to the Good Neighbor Plan that addresses litter, noise, and security procedures. The county does intend to select a third-party operator, such as Catholic Community Service, to operate the permanent supportive housing. And in the future, they do anticipate that they would likely transfer ownership to that third party. The permanent supportive housing site is proposed to be operated in compliance with several plans. These plans are included as exhibits to the prepared development agreement document, and they include on-site security plan, a transportation plan for residents to obtain adequate services, on-site support services plan appropriate for the needs of the residents, including case management, behavioral and physical healthcare, employment preparations and counseling, housing services, and other supports to improve health, financial resources, housing stability, and community connection. In addition, King County would provide a common recreation space plan within the some of the existing rooms, as I mentioned, as they're being converted on the first floor to provide that common open space for exercise and for laundry. And then they would have that outdoor recreation plan, so they're going to convert the existing pool to provide an outdoor gathering space with picnic tables. They would have bike lockers, and they would also, within some of the existing parking spaces, include a smoking shelter. And then they would also have a fire and life safety safety plan that has initially been approved by the Renton Regional Fire Authority. So use of the property for permanent supportive housing would be affordable housing, as the term is defined under RCW 3678-0302. The proposed permanent supportive housing would require building and or construction permits. It would create additional demand for transportation and park system improvements, school facilities within the Renton School District, and then the Renton School District would provide transportation to eligible students living at this facility to comply with the McKinney-Vento Act as needed basis, and then also fire protection facilities would be included as part of a TEI, and that would be reviewed by Renton Regional Fire Authority. And as part of that proposal or that future permit, applicable fees would be paid in accordance with the city's current schedule. Going back just a second, we did have public comment. We did receive one public comment during the land use notice regarding safety concerns. Specifically, if there's anything in place to prevent property destruction and theft, as well as protection and safety of neighboring tenants, or if there's a spike in crime related to this project, what steps would be taken to solve it. According to the county, collectively, the proposed plans and operational conditions are anticipated to provide safe, decent, welcoming, and appropriate living environment where daily needs can be met, including the supportive services people experiencing chronic homelessness need to achieve and maintain health and stability while ensuring compatibility with the project surroundings. In addition, I received comments from the Renton Police Department and noting that they are committed to providing safety as well as the well-being of residents, businesses, and visitors within the city of Renton. And if there's any crime, obviously, that can be reported by calling the Renton Police Department. As part of the development agreement as well, you would find that the city does reserve the authority to impose new or different regulations to the extent required by serious threat to public health and safety. All right, moving on now to the development agreement. It sets forth the development standards and other provisions that would apply here that govern and vest the development, the use, and mitigation of the development of the property for the duration of the agreement. And through the approval of the agreement, the City of Renton City Council can issue land use approval for this particular project as an alternative, as Vanessa mentioned earlier, to the traditional conditional use permit and site plan review that would normally be processed by the hearing, or the decision would come about through the hearing examiner approval process. So that's where we're at with that. The project elements include permitted use, operations, and other development standards and requirements, So once the development and resolution are executed, the property may be used and operated as permanent supportive housing, and the site and building preparation period, if they're allowed to move forward, would be expected to take 3 to 6 months to get it up and operating. And then the operations would follow the plans, as I previously mentioned. In slide 6, they would pay applicable fees, comply with the urban design regulations, and follow other building and fire protection codes. In addition, the agreement does have some terms, vesting periods, and general provisions associated with it. For example, the term does require the operator to occupy the site within 4 years of the effective date of the resolution. Just a couple more slides here. As part of the SEPA environmental review process, King County concluded that there was no significant adverse impacts associated with this project, so just highlight that. And then there's also availability for adequate public services and facilities to accommodate the proposed project. And rather than getting into the details, I'll probably do that at the public hearing, but in short, the project would comply with comprehensive plan compliance consistency, zoning development standards. The design district is located in the design district D. No major changes to the exterior of the building, just some minor TI improvements to make accommodations, complies with critical areas, site plan review, conditional use permit criteria. Like I said, I'll run through those in greater detail during the public hearing. And so the development agreement is also consistent with the municipal code. So finishing up here, staff is hoping for your support to sign the committee report, and happy to answer any questions. And there's a quick shot there of, if you're not familiar with the site, of some of what the building and some of the rest of the site looks like.
And Clark, if I can just add one last thing that I didn't mention in the preamble, that as you'll see in the committee report, the request would be to have staff advance the resolution and bring this back on the 24th of this month, following a public hearing that would be at the regular council meeting this evening.
Yes, thank you.
And one last note here, we're not asking you to sign a committee report in advance of the public hearing. That is, we're not asking council to take any action until they've had the chance this evening to consider feedback or comments they may get from the public.
Thank you, Vanessa, Clark, and Chip. I was going to say so much. I wasn't even going to ask folks for the committee report until after the public hearing, knowing that process wanted to complete first. Didn't want to get ahead of that. So I imagine we might have some questions on this. I see one hand raised from Councilmember Alpers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Obviously, with this sort of thing, the devil certainly is in the details and that sort of thing. As I read through a lot of this, some things jumped out at me. One of the things was the adherence to a good neighbor plan that addresses litter, noise, and security and that sort of thing. You may not be able to speak on that, but that's any idea what that good neighbor plan looks like? I mean, I think it kind of speaks to the public comment that you, or public correspondence that you mentioned. I mean, the one thing we don't necessarily want is, okay, well, the written police, they said they will respond to everything. Well, of course, but any idea what that good neighbor plan actually, consists of when they say that?
Yeah, good question. So that good neighbor plan is kind of encapsulated or incorporated into some of those other plans. So the security plan, the sports services plan, and that are available and attached as exhibits to the development agreement. And it goes into greater detail on what it means to be a good neighbor within those plans.
Okay. And as a follow-up, when I look at the exhibits in the security plan, a lot of that seems to speak to the security of the residents in the facility. But I know, of course, a lot of the, the surrounding area and citizens, that sort of thing, might be thinking of, overall the security of the area and crime and things like that. It jumped out at me that when I looked at the security plan, it all kind of mentioned, security of the people there. And so I would just like to, whenever it comes out, to know exactly where are the boundaries that, are going to be put in place so that we don't have, just another burden on the police department and that sort of thing for this sort of venture. Obviously, it's necessary, but like I said, the devil is in the details with that sort of thing. Any additional commentary with that?
If Clark, if I can jump in,
Sure.
Councilmember Albertson, just to this is really an important aspect of this development agreement and this land use proposal you have, because there has to be some responsibility for King County as the landowner to ensure that the actions that happen on their property, the expectations of the land use permit. Land use permitting is all about land use compatibility and ensuring that land uses don't impact other land uses around them. That's why this is especially important here, and that we have it as part of the land use approval. So there is some commitment from King County as part of the condition of approval that they understand the expectations on the county to oversee the operations and to ensure, to the degree reasonable possible, they have minimized or mitigated for any effects or impacts on surrounding land use activities. If this wasn't mentioned, the call, it could be the expectation that the city of Renton staff would respond. And that's not what we want to have here. And that's not to say we're putting all the responsibility on King County, but they are the landowner and they are the user of the facility. So they have to bear the responsibility for what happens on their property and the effects on others, just like any other property owner in the city of Renton. That's why we have a code compliance department for dealing with exactly these types of issues. So anyway, we're not holding King County to a different standard than we would hold anybody else, but it's really important for both the county and the city to have clear understandings of the expectations in terms of each other's roles moving forward.
All right, next hand I see up is Councilman Obama.
Thank you, Council President. And thank you, Clark, for your presentation. Very thorough. I wholeheartedly support the health through housing development. However, I do have some questions in line in terms of the details that we have here. And in particular, I have a question about the fence that need to be put up. So that kind of brought me to some concerns. I know that we have potentially have started filling the units up. Do we know how, in terms of the effectiveness of the Good Neighbor Agreement, in terms of the need for the fence? Because if I look at the model that we had at the Red Line Hotel, I'm just trying to see what is the difference in that usage, right? And then also to follow up as part of the whole thing, I wanted to know what is the updated status as far as guests in the Red Line Hotel, who are the number of guests occupying it right now. I know I'm throwing all these questions at you.
Okay. Clark, if you want to answer the fence question, then I'll take the occupancy of the Red Lion.
Yes, so the King County has looked at the existing site, and they've initially started off looking at the stormwater facility that's located kind of in the south portion of the lot in terms of fencing that area off. They haven't made a commitment to do that yet. So they're essentially leaving that as an existing condition, but they are proposing an 8-foot black vinyl chain link fence along the eastern property boundary as well as the northern property boundary. And the purpose of that is to provide a little bit more security for the site. And then also the applicant has indicated that one of the business owners of the park to the north had requested that they put that fence there. So that's kind of where that new fencing is coming from.
Yeah. And Councilmember Van, on the red lion issue, we have been told by King County recently that they are approximately at 50% of usage of the people at the red lion compared to where they were a year ago today. So they've removed approximately half the people that are there and are now in other facilities.
Thank you.
All right, next hand I see is Councilmember Albertson, followed by Councilmember Prest.
So yes, I did have another question referring to I was reading through the draft and referring to the kind of the healthcare access aspect of it. A few times I see access on demand, integrated healthcare and that sort of thing. Whenever I hear on demand and healthcare, that's almost an oxymoron to me. Last time you walked into the doctor's office and saw a doctor right away or anything like that. So on a serious note, I am curious when they say on demand, and I mean, I'm curious about the ratio of healthcare staff. They talk about the mobile behavioral health unit. I'm just hoping that this isn't setting up a certain expectation that really can't be met. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all, when it comes to the type of healthcare services that they may need and what on-demand really means in relation to, well, yeah, you'll be on the list and we'll get to you and that sort of thing. I mean, have they really fleshed that out at all? The meaning of what that means and what they expect from that?
I think I might turn that one over to Chip. He's probably has some better interaction with the on-demand healthcare service.
Yeah, great question. And while Clark's looking to me, let me look to Vanessa for help. My expectation based on on-demand is that they actually have staff that are trained, but they're not trained to the full degree possible based on what the healthcare issue may be for the client that's there. So having staff on demand in some cases, they may be able to perform an intervention if it's a minor issue, but in other cases, on demand may be calling 911 and getting an escort to a hospital for emergency service. So on demand simply means that there's somebody there that can see to the physical and mental health needs of the individual right away, whether it's by themselves or basically getting them to that service.
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer. But my understanding from the application materials from King County is not that all the services will be on site 24/7 a day, 24/7, but that they will have staff on site 24/7 that can help connect them to these services when necessary.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. That's exactly what I was wondering. I also see the mobile unit traveling amongst the different sites, and I'm wondering about response time, how often, and that sort of thing. But I'm sure it'll all come out.
All right, Councilmember Perez.
Thank you. I think the concerns that we have have to do a lot with our past experience, but I read it with a lot of details, and I'm hoping that that our relationship with King County and their response to this partnership will be more positive this time. So here is for hope. The only question that I have is that you guys mentioned that you have conversations with the police department about the response. How about with the Renton Regional Fire Authority, since they have had this enormous impact to provide services that are adequate for this facility?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Perez. I'm sorry, Clark. I'm going to jump in and say that we have, as part of the land use application process, we have provided application to be able to be reviewed, not just by the police department, by the fire authority and other affected agencies and departments. Clark has worked very closely with those other agencies like the fire authority on this and reviewing the applications and materials. And Clark, I know we got comments from police, but I don't remember if we got any comments back from the fire authority. If we did, could you share those?
Yeah, we did receive comments back from the Renton Regional Fire Authority, and they pretty standard comments that would be associated with any type of development, namely fire impact fees, the ability to come in and pull fire permits for codes that would be associated with the alarms, ingress, egress, those standard permits that would be associated from converting or changing the use from a hotel, which is H1, to apartment housing, which is R2. So that would be required to get approval for fire safety and evacuation plan, as I mentioned, and then submit that with the Renton Regional Fire Authority to comply with their codes. So that would be in working order, and then each time they provide the fire and life safety plan, as Chip mentioned, we send those documents over to the Renton Regional Fire Authority to get their kind of blessing before we move forward. And these advisory notes will be included as part of the resolution, so they'll be included as attachments to the resolution that will be coming before you on January 24th.
Thank you.
Okay, any final questions before we move on to our last agenda item? I know this won't be our only opportunity to ask questions of staff on this, as we have a public hearing later tonight, and obviously it's coming back even if we do approve the committee report, because that's just the first step. So lots of opportunities still ahead, but if you have anything urgent or pressing you got to ask right now, this is your last chance. Going once, going twice. Thank you for this presentation. We'll look forward to it. Having had the opportunity to briefly tour the facility when it was announced, I can say that I'm excited about the possibilities it'll offer for service there, and like Councilmember Perez, have every faith and optimism that our past experiences aren't going to burn us as far as what the potential might be for this site and the services it will provide, the essential services. So with that, thank you, and we'll move on to our final topic for the evening. And that is our regional committee assignment. So I think we have I'm not sure if we can put that up on the screen, the matrix, that would be helpful, or if you have that available in front of you. I think this one will require a bit of visual to look through. And while that's coming, I can say what's kind of driving this, of course, is with the departure of Councilmember Corman. There are now some vacancies that we need to fill, and some seats that may shuffle around. I'm certainly would be willing to, if someone is interested in one of the committees I'm serving on, it's not a pre-assigned Sound Cities Association committee, willing to potentially step aside to make room. I want to certainly encourage, especially our newer council members or council members who may not have had an opportunity to participate regionally, to get that opportunity. Obviously, it's important for the city as well to have that representation. So we really do value your service on these. Looking down the list, you can see kind of where folks currently are, the lay of the land. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend we start with the vacancies, and then if there are more than one member interested, my hope is we can just hash it out here tonight with agreement that we won't have to do anything that's just formal as a vote in the meeting. We haven't had to do that in the past, so hopefully we can find some level of consensus in sharing. So, Councilmember Halloran.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to offer our newest members the opportunity to work on the RIA, which is the Watershed Resource Inventory Areas, which are the one that I'm currently chairing, or chaired last year, is the Green, Duwamish, and Black River Watershed Resource Area, and I am more than happy to step aside and allow somebody else to chair that. I know, Mr. McCurvin, you and I had talked briefly about this late last year. I don't know what if we had actually came to a decision, but I'm more than happy to give that opportunity for RIA 9 to somebody else. Just wanted to let you know.
Great, thank you. And as we go through, obviously you see some names more than others on here, and so we want to make sure we do, including my own, give those opportunities. So I do appreciate that, Councilmember Halloran. And along with RIA 9, obviously there's also RIA 8, which I currently am on, and that's one I'm in a similar position that I would be willing to let either Councilmember Halloran, if we're interested, as the alternate, or someone else possibly step in. And obviously some of these, as you can see, have both a delegate and a alternate position. So in some cases, hopefully, where there's more interest from more than one, we can piece both folks in. And alternate obviously is a great place, especially for our new folks, oftentimes to start to kind of learn kind of what's going on, get the lay of the land, and then obviously still be very, very much involved. I can tell you, being an alternate, you're still very much a part of the committee. You just may not be voting on a given particular day from time to time. So I see more hands raised. So I'm assuming Councilmember Halloran's hand was raised from before. So I'm going to go in the order I see on my screen after that, which is Councilmember Perez, Councilmember Van, and then Councilmember Albertson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one question for clarification. I think that the boards that we have in Renton, or we can alternate that, but I don't know if we have that authority in the Sound Cities Association boards. I don't think so, right? Right.
The Sound Cities ones go through a separate appointment process. So anything that says SCA here is already locked in, not open for negotiation today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you for clarifying. Councilmember Van.
I think Councilmember Albertson is next, perhaps, or I can go.
I was going in the order on my screen. That may not be the same order as everyone else's screen. It's hard to say.
Yes, Councilmember Van, you're next.
Okay. Yeah, so in that light, I was also was thinking of the inclusion task force as well, because that is part of the Renton. But, you know, as we had received new committee assignments, I would like to be a part of the South County Area Transportation Board, and then East Side Transportation Partnership. Because I haven't had the opportunity to be on transportation. I think it's important to represent our community here at that level. So either or me. And then of course the Cedar River Council.
Okay, and it might help if we go, just to make sure if there's interest from other councils, we go maybe one at a time. I do think, and I do appreciate as we're kind of having notes as we go through this, of level of interest, to make sure everyone's good. I obviously think that makes sense. Obviously, based on your Renton committee assignments, I know it was helpful for me being on the regional transit committee and also being on the transportation committee here. So sometimes those synergies are really nice. Councilmember Albertson and then Councilmember Perez.
Yes, I was going to throw my hat in the ring for the East Side Transportation Partnership, if that's appropriate there, and maybe also the King County Parks and Trails Coalition.
Okay, I was trying to find that second one. Okay, any additional interest in other regional boards or committees? Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Council President McGurven. I was actually also going to say the King County Parks and Trails Coalition and the Cedar River Council, but I also see that that's an SCA, and so wasn't sure how that process was looking, but also interested in those two, but I'm open for anything.
Yes, and so, sorry, you said Cedar River Council, and sorry, which was the other one that was an SCA?
Or no, it wasn't. It was King County Parks and Trails Coalition, the second one that Councilmember Albertson called.
Got it. Okay. All right. Councilmember Perez.
Yeah, I just was going to mention that I have been involved in the Sound County Area Transportation Board and the East Side Transportation Partnership, and it's exactly the same meeting, but one is in the south and the other one is in the east. So normally, if Councilmember Van wants to, my suggestion is if Councilmember wants to sit on the South County, she can be the alternate on the east side and backwards with Councilmember Albertson as well, because it's exactly the same presentation from King County. It's just that one is from the east side, it is with the cities on the east side, and the other one's when the cities on the south. And we have a vote in issues that are related with metro in the south and issues that had related with sound transit in the east.
I think that is a fine suggestion in the spirit of cooperation and dividing up duties. As long as we can figure out obviously where folks' preferences are between those. And we're doing a good job so far at filling some of these ad hoc sites, though. Hopefully we can reach some resolution on positions where obviously there's only one and not an alternate, but that's a great suggestion to start with. Councilmember Obama.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as far as the East Side Transportation Partnership. Yeah, Councilmember Albertson can be the voting member, and I can be alternative if that's okay with him. I just need to be there to get all the information. But certainly, I think that would really make Renton have strong representation.
All right, Councilmember Prince.
Yes, Mr. President. I was going to say, on the ones where there looks like there's not an alternate, you can always reach out to the organization, and they're more than willing to allow there to be alternates. You just have to reach out to them and say, hey, we're going to have an alternate for X, Y, and Z. And generally, they'll be okay with it because what they really want is to make sure elected officials are at these meetings.
That is an excellent point. Yeah, and as I'm looking at the one that didn't have an alternate listed, I'm certain, most if not all of these are all open meetings. So certainly anyone that's open and eligible to attend and get the information. If you want more meetings, there are an endless amount of meetings out there for you within the region. So, Councilmember O'Halloran.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I just wanted to share my experience on these committee meetings. I think it's extremely important for the alternate to attend the meetings, whether the delegate is there or not, because that's when you're up and you have to fill the shoes for the delegate. It's really important to be up to speed, because typically the delegate's not going to have time to get you up to speed, and that's why he or she cannot be there. So, and they're fascinating learning experiences, all of them. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Councilmember Halloran. Councilmember Perez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, but just following what Councilmember Prince said, if there is the possibility to add an alternate in any of the Sound Cities associations, I will like to be an alternate for the Regional Transit Committee and the Growth Management Policy Board.
And unfortunately, as you pointed out previously, those alternates are already designated by STA, so we can't designate our own alternates. Members of other cities would fill in if we are unable to, if the member's not able to.
I understand that. I'm just mentioning because what I understood from Councilmember Prince is that that was a possibility. But if it's not, I can totally understand it from the beginning. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Prince?
And I guess what I should have been more clear. I meant for the ones that, like King County Parks and Trails Coalition, and some of the ones where there was only one person, there wasn't an alternate slot. Yeah, SCA goes through their own process that they did a couple of months ago to decide members and alternates.
All right, Councilmember Rivera.
So then on that note, may I ask if Councilmember Albertson is all right with it, would it be all right if I were to, since he has the transportation partnership, if I could do King County Parks and Trails Coalition, he could be the alternate for it? If it's okay with Councilmember Albertson.
That is fine.
All right, see, spirit of cooperation. We are running short on time here. I'm going to note we have the council meeting coming up in about 7 minutes, so I want to look to staff if there's anything else we absolutely need to get filled out tonight. I want to make sure we do that. Otherwise, I don't believe we have an official process for blessing this. It's always been kind of a consensus document. Certainly, if any member has an objection, do please raise it. I also want to note really quickly, there were a couple of vacancies that Councilmember Corman did create that I believe have been filled in, and certainly want to make sure that in the spirit of transparency, were acknowledged. One was the I-405 Executive Board with Councilmember Halloran, and then also myself on the East Rail Regional Advisory Council, and I'm not sure if I'm missing any others, but I just wanted to acknowledge certainly those. And again, if there is someone, if there's what I'm again offering, if there's something that's not an STA one that I'm on that someone's interested in, please so state, and I'd be happy to yield if that's an area you're certainly interested in. I have, as I said, enough meetings typically that I am happy to share. So, Councilmember Perez.
Very quick, Mr. President. I would also like to recommend that if in the future we receive normally around October the Sound Cities Association list of boards that you want to participate, I will appreciate if Doug Levy will send us a recommendation where he feels that is a need of us to be part of these boards, which ones are very important and our voice need to be there, knowing that not all the boards, even though all the boards are important, there are some that certainly we want to have a presence. So even if we have to apply every year and we don't get it, maybe one day we will get it.
All right, I see it. Thank you. I think that's a great idea. I see a couple highlighted items that maybe we can try to hash out within like a minute or two real quick. If we can resolve the Cedar River Council between Councilmembers Van Rivera, and then possibly find us an alternate for the remaining two. Although I'm going to say I don't feel the alternate is urgent business tonight. Someone later could indicate it, since no one's jumping at it, and we could fill that at a later date if we needed to.
Mr. President?
Yes, Councilmember Albertson.
For Councilmember Perez's comments, I'm fine being the alternate for the South County Area Transportation Board, that little flip-flop.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Rivera.
I'm happy to offer alternate for, I don't think I can say it right, Raya 9, Habitat Recovery and Management, to Holleran, and then between me and Councilmember Van, I would love to be part of Cedar River Council, passionately, but happy to work it out with Councilmember Van. I would love the opportunity, but Councilmember Van, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think we can definitely ask, since this is a Renton representative, I think we can definitely ask the board, for those who've previously been on Cedar River Council, maybe we can make the connection and then ask for an alternative as well.
All right.
So we can touch base offline.
I think that is a great suggestion, and I will also add, I think on Ryan 9, Councilmember Halloran had said she'd be willing to not be the designated member, and potentially, so if Councilmember Rivera wanted to move up, we could probably flip-flop that, I think is what I heard correctly earlier.
That is correct.
And so with that, we are dangerously low on time, so I'm going to give, if there's any final comments on this, otherwise I think we can, if we need any further refinements, we can do that at a later date, but I think we have some good starting space with this, so. All right, I'm seeing some head nods. We're dangerously close to out of time. You get a 3-minute break before the council meeting. Thank you all very much. Committee of the Whole is adjourned.